Jimmy Dore had an interview recently with Dr. Drew. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Drew. I am. Dr. Drew, he used to host a show. This is how I came to know of him, not because of his medical profession, but he used to host a show on MTV with another guy, Adam something. I can't remember Adam's last name, but it was called Love Line. And like people would call in and ask for relationship advice or that kind of thing. Sometimes there were questions like about sexual advice and embarrassing moments that people have had. It was really, really interesting for that point in time. Adam Carolla. Yes. Thank you so much for that. So that's how I knew about who Dr. Drew was. And then later on, I realized, you know, he really was like a medical professional. He also has helped people in reference to addiction. So he hosted this show at one point in time called Celebrity Rehab, something like that. So anyway, he's had years and years of being a medical professional. That is his field. And he happens to host shows here and there, like me have a podcast, that kind of thing. I want you to hear this piece. Most of this interview is about the jab. This part right here towards the end is the part that I want to zero in on. Because some people, for whatever reason, they have assumed that Dr. Drew is conservative. He clears that up here, by the way. But the wake up piece in reference to Jimmy Dore is that I want people to hear what he is saying here in this particular discussion. And I want people to wake up. For a second, if you don't like Jimmy Dore, whatevs. Close your eyes and pretend it's someone else. But listen to what is said. Because there are a lot of times where there are other issues that are used against the American people to keep us divided or to start some type of division. And every time that happens, it takes our eye away from the real issue that affect the 99% of us. And that is done on purpose. This is a really good interview. It's a little bit over, it's almost an hour and a half. Listen to this piece here.
Talking about COVID and vaccines, but that's just, we could talk about almost any topic. And I feel like we are in the upside down. What do we do? What is going on? I always thought I was sort of a left-leaning libertarian. Now I don't know what I am. I guess I'm independent is all I can call myself, but I am troubled by the excesses on both sides. They all sort of drive towards the upside down, where things that are pragmatically useful and beneficial to human beings beg no influence here in this world. And how do we get back, or do you have any thoughts about getting back to a world where people can thrive and build and be economically engaged, and just the opposite of what we're doing now, where everyone is tribal and upside down in their understanding of reality?
And back when people had common sense, I'm sorry, back when more people had common sense, I feel like people really lost it. I feel like between Donald Trump winning in 2016 and with the pandemic, I feel like people have their brains are just wrecked to where it has gotten to the point where people don't even have common sense anymore. It's like, I really do feel like some people would hear someone that is a Republican say, hey, the sky is blue. And they'll snap back and be like, no, it's not. You're just saying that because you're right wing. Stuff like that. Like, I feel like people really just lost it, right? How did we get to that point? I feel like it started with 2016. Some of you may feel like it started further back than that. But when Dr. Drew mentions the upside down, it reminds me of Stranger Things. In Stranger Things, there is the upside down. And it's basically the world above ground, underneath the ground, flipped upside down, and it's darker. And there's weird things that happen in the upside down. But it's like people have really lost their minds. Like, just basic common sense is gone. I'm going to tell you what I think is a part of that, but listen to what Jimmy has to say first.
Well, look what's happening in France right now, right? So in France, they tried to raised the retirement age from 62 to 64, and millions of people got in the street for weeks. They're not stopping, and that's what we need here in the United States. That happens in France. It doesn't happen here, and that's the only thing. So the problem is people think the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are actually opposition parties. They agree on all the big things. They all agreed on, they agree on war. They agree on the military-industrial complex, imperialism, hegemony. They agree on that. They agree on crushing a railroad strike. All right. They agree on. So they're both pro-war parties. They're both anti-worker. They're both in the pocket of big health, big pharma, and of Silicon Valley. And so that what people need to realize is the Democratic Party is not a left-wing party. They are a pro-war, pro-Wall Street party. And so we need an organization to go against them.
That piece is very crucial. They agree with corporate powers. They agree with corporatism. They agree with that. Neither party has problems with the billionaires. Someone say, oh, with Bernie Sanders is registered. He's independent. And even he don't really have that much problem with the billionaires as he said he did, or otherwise he wouldn't have told you to vote for the corporate opponent that he ran against. But that's a whole nother story. But neither of these parties have a problem with billionaires. Neither of these parties have a problem with Wall Street. When it comes to the corporate powers that be, they have bipartisanship. When it comes to war, they have bipartisanship because that also is a part of the corporate powers that be, because the military industrial complex is backed up by Wall Street. So since both of these parties support Wall Street, they support the military industrial complex. All of these things are connected. Anytime you have someone like George Soros and his son, by the way, in recent news, having inside meetings with people in Congress. What does that tell you what's going on? Having inside meetings with organizations like the Sunrise Movement. Why are these grassroots organizations taking money from billionaires? More people need to call that out. I don't care if you volunteered for the organization. Call it out. Ask them why they're taking money from these people. Ask them. Let's go on.
And so when you have people like Bernie Sanders or the Squad, AOC, and those people, the Justice Democrats, inside Congress as a Democrat, that's actually a negative because we're not going to have real change. And because that makes people think that there's someone fighting for them inside the government. There isn't. Bernie Sanders tucked his tail and doesn't want to be considered Ralph Nader. And so he goes along with every horrible thing, including being a war pig, which he is. He's a war pig of the highest honor, and he smears peace activists. That's what Bernie Sanders has turned into. He's a mouthpiece now for the establishment.
And this piece we got to chime in on as well. And he's right. Some people still do believe that those progressives are in there fighting for them. AOC was called out, during Dave Sirota's interview, voting along with Joe Biden, 91% of the time. He didn't push back. I'm not going to get into that discussion. And that interview was cray. But how is she fighting for us? How? All the people who come to defend AOC every time she gets criticized, or any of the squad members when they get criticized, how are they fighting for us? How is it that much better to have them there when they're not doing anything, voting along with establishment Democrats? How is that better? If Jamal Bowman, if his voting record is almost identical to Elliot Engel, who was his predecessor, what good is it to have Jamal Bowman there? These are the kind of questions we need to ask. These are the kind of questions.
Disgusting. And so what we need to, there's not going to be change in this country until people lose faith in the system and get out in the streets. You know, Christian Smalls organized the first Amazon union on Staten Island. And how did he do that? He did it with Trump voters because that's who live on Staten Island and that's who work there. He organized along class lines. People have to realize that we have to organize along class lines, and these aren't left-right problems anymore. Again, when 80% of the country lives paycheck to paycheck, these are not left-right issues.
And that doesn't mean, I want to add this as well. When we say organize along class lines, that doesn't mean you still can't organize for other issues. Just like when we organize for Medicare for all, that doesn't mean you can't organize for police brutality. You know what I mean? So I just want to say that because people hear this and be like, what about my issue? What about my issue? What about me? What about you? What about that? And it's just like, you can still do those things. But in reference to like a mass movement, yes, there needs to be some type of class movement in this country. Otherwise, the billionaires will continue to win. And as long as you're distracted over red team, blue team, We will not get there. A lot of this is theater. A lot of it. The Trump legal woes, Joe Biden falling on a bike. Like, a lot of this is theater, and it keeps people distracted. If they're not distracted by that, then they're distracted by the Kardashians. They're distracted by the latest gossip on Entertainment Tonight. They're distracted by those things. And so that they're not focused on the financial troubles that a lot of people are in right now in this country, especially since the pandemic.
We're spending $1 trillion on empire and not taking care of our own country. These are not left-right issues. And what the biggest thing they don't want us to realize, Dr. Drew, is that we have more in common. They want us to blame our enemy for, they did a controlled demolition of our economy during COVID. And then they want us to blame our neighbors for the economic pain we felt that only helped a handful of millionaires. And I'm not going to blame my neighbor because he wouldn't take a vaccine that never worked the way they said it did in the first place. I'm going to love my neighbor, and I'm going to realize that I am my neighbor and that we have more in common that separates us, and we share a common enemy. And that is what scares the hell out of them the most. When the left and right come together and realize that we have more in common that divides us, that's what's going to really scare. That's the only thing.
Let me chime in here for just a second, because I want to add something to this as well. It is really disturbing that our country actually became divided over healthcare. It's very disturbing. It's disturbing that our country became divided over bodily autonomy. This is how mainstream media really just broke people's brains. How people like really fed into the propaganda. The same people that people have been watching, the same people who've been lying to you for the past couple of years. They lied to you about Russiagate. They lied to you about the Iraq war, and you still want to believe and listen to those people. That's the thing that drives me crazy. Why would you trust them? Why would you trust them when you have someone like Rachel Maddow who argued in court that they're not even news, they're infotainment? Why would you trust them? And people still do. Too much propaganda that is happening to the point where the country became divided over fucking healthcare. That's how ridiculous it is.
That scares the establishment, by the way. And they've got us pretty divided. Every way the corporate media, they report every story in a way that separates the country, whether it be COVID lockdowns or vaccines, whether it be Black Lives Matter or Kyle Rittenhouse, whether it be the Ukraine war or the Syrian war. Everything they report is a way to separate us and blame our neighbor. Well, we have a lot more in common, and that's my message for people. Your neighbor is not your enemy. The enemy is the people who want to take away your free speech, and the people who want more war and want to break more unions and end more strikes. Those are the people who want to control doctors, like they just passed a law in California, making sure that doctors couldn't give alternative treatments against Big Pharma's recommendation. We got to come together against the establishment. And
let me just chime in here and say something about the neighbor thing. Nick and I have talked about this before. They really do not want you to talk to your neighbors. They want you to stay inside your homes, be forever online on social media, and watch CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. That's all the information they really want you to get. They don't want you to talk to your neighbor because they're afraid that your neighbor may give you some information that you need that they don't want you to have. Let's be real. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if your neighbor is Republican, Democrat, etc. Why are we using that as a dividing line in reference to who we're going to talk to? Why? Makes no sense. Makes no sense. But they don't want you to talk to your neighbor. They want you to be afraid of your neighbor. They want you to be afraid of people who have a different opinion than you. You're not even allowed to disagree with people anymore. You disagree with someone, mainstream media wants you to cancel that person and cut them off. You go on Twitter, you disagree with someone, the people on Twitter want you to cancel that person and cut them off. They don't want you to have a discussion. They don't want you to have a meeting with that person. They want you guys to argue back and forth, and then you cut them off and let them go. And that's how we never get anywhere. And that's why, in reference to the left, that's why the left doesn't get anything done. I've seen it time and time again. Let's try to organize this and do this. Oh no, so-and-so's a part of that, so I'm not going to participate. Every fucking time. You can't, I'm not kidding. For those of us who are organizers, it is very frustrating. And I don't see other people having this problem. But when it comes to the left, it's just like, no, 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 we can't organize with that group. We can't talk to those people over there. Didn't that person make a comment 3-4 years ago? They can't be a part of this at all. And you know what ends up happening? The event doesn't happen. Some of these people are infiltrators. Some of these people are ops. And some of these people are fed. And I call it like it is. I'm sorry, Marvin. I'm sorry. I've been better. I've been better. I'm sorry. But that's why it doesn't get anywhere. Nowhere. You have people like legacy left media people arguing with Nick, my comrade from RBN, about doing mutual aid and direct action. Make it make sense. If you say you're for the workers and you're for the workers going on strike, well, part of that means you need to have some form of mutual aid. That's required when people go on strike. They need to have some form of mutual aid. They get mad at us for talking about mutual aid and direct action. Why not focus on voting? Just sit back and do nothing. These things can coexist together, but it does not happen because the people who actually have the resources and the platform to make these events bigger than what they are, they tune it out. They drown it out. People too focused on their fucking egos and their careers. They don't want to promote marches for Medicare for all. They don't want to promote an anti-war rally. They want to get paid and interview AOC. Make it make sense.
People looking to government and electoral politics to change things, it's not going to happen.
It's interesting. I have not heard well, there you go. You've not heard the Christian virtue of love thy neighbor as thyself in many, many decades. I've not heard that said in a long time, which is kind of interesting that you're framing this as neighborliness. I think that is a great way to do it, number one. Number two, would it not be accurate to say that they are inflating or inflaming racial tensions as a way of obfuscating class tensions so they can maintain their elite status?
Dr. Drew, that is a bullseye. 100%. You are correct. So what people don't realize that during the Democratic Party turned its back on the working class during the era of Bill Clinton. And people think that he was the lesser of two evil. Turns out he wasn't the lesser of two evil because he was able to do things that a Republican wasn't, meaning he was able to pass NAFTA. George Bush the first tried to pass NAFTA. He couldn't because the Blue Dog Democrats wouldn't go along with it. Here comes Bill Clinton. He gives cover to the Blue Dog Democrats. They cut the legs out from underneath the workers and unions for a generation. So that's what people need to realize, right? We got to come together and we have more in common. And the Democratic Party turned their back on workers. So now that's why Trump is able to get blue-collar workers to vote for a billionaire who never did anything for a worker in his life because they're desperate. I interviewed a Waffle House cook.
That piece is important. We got to go back to Bill Clinton. I think someone mentioned Barack Obama. Gene said the election of Obama made people lose their minds objectively. And we can go back to Bill Clinton as well. Remember, it was Bill Clinton who kind of threw the working class people under the bus with NAFTA. So everybody can sit back now and point fingers at Donald Trump or whoever, Republican, but you have to go back to Bill Clinton. Yes, he did increase the minimum wage. Yes, he did do that. But he also brought in NAFTA. And that devastated the Rust Belt. And so here we are. And so when people ask, like, why did people in the Rust Belt come out and support Donald Trump? Because look at who turned against them. And you have to remember that some of those towns heavily supported Barack Obama when he said he was going to change things. We're talking about groups of people that voted for Barack Obama twice, some of them twice, and then turned around and voted for Donald Trump. There's a reason why that happened. And not everybody that voted for Trump is racist or sexist or misogynist. Some of them motherfuckers are just poor. And they were tired of it. And they were tired of being told that their town and their jobs were going to be saved, and it wasn't. Let's go on.
during the Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump election, a Waffle House cook in Virginia. And he said, Jimmy, we all know that Donald Trump is a loudmouth Yankee. He should have had his ass kicked a long time ago, but he's the only one promising us anything. And so anybody who goes up and promises people health, you promise people health care. We're the last country in the world who still won't give people health care. People still go bankrupt. I went bankrupt because I got sick in 2006 and I had platinum health care insurance coverage I was supposed to. So the Democratic Party turned their back on workers. No political party represents workers, which is why the Democrats and the establishment want to talk all about genders and bathrooms and race and white supremacy. That's not that any of those things aren't problems, but they're overemphasizing those things because they don't want to talk about the class struggle, which is what we already lost. They won. Okay. How many more billionaires got made during COVID while everybody got flattened? So that's what people don't realize. The reason why we're talking about all these issues that seem like culture wars is because the establishment wants to distract us from the economic war that is being waged and won by the establishment every day.
That is very important for people to hear and understand. When he talks about people that became richer during the pandemic or became billionaires during the pandemic, Rihanna was one of those people. And though I enjoy a Rihanna song from time to time, just like a lot of you, Rihanna became mega rich during the pandemic. So did JayZ. You know, you had people who were venture capitalists that became multimillionaires, were already a millionaire, became multimillionaires during the pandemic. These people increased their wealth while the rest of Americans were being laid off or lost their jobs because our state was locked down and those businesses had to close. And we were given a stimulus check while you had new billionaires. And they wanted to give you, let's give them $1,200 check. That'll solve their problems. And the CEOs of these companies became wealthier while their employees struggled. It's a class issue.
And the maintenance of an elite. They are really interested in maintaining their status as elite above all other consideration by fanning whatever they need to do to fan the tribal flames. They will do it provided that it maintains their elite status. It's that more people. I hope more people wake up to that. I think that's at least they'll stop listening to some of these people that have so poorly served us.
I hope more people wake up to that too. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm screaming in the ether here, but that's why I'm glad he was able to go on Dr. Drew's show and get this message across.
What I try to tell people is that, you know, what would help Black and brown people and transgendered people more than anything? Medicare for all. You want to help them? Give them a living wage. Give them a college education that doesn't bury them under mountains of debt. You want to help those people? That's how you help those people. You want to dismantle the prison industrial complex? That's how you help Black and brown people. And that's how you get behind them, not by playing culture wars and calling people white supremacists and dividing the country even further.
Right, and they're just taking the status quo and sort of expanding the status quo, which is not good. The status quo is not good. It should be that it's the status quo that needs to be dismantled, not the institutions. Jimmy, let's leave it at that. I'd say very fun.
A really good interview here, you guys. If you haven't seen it, like I said, it's much longer than this. But the name of the video is called Jimmy Dore on comedy, woke ideology, and how to enrage both conservatives and liberals. Ask Dr. Drew. So that's on Dr. Drew's channel. It is almost 90 minutes long, the interview. And the part that I just played for you is closer towards the end of the interview. But definitely, check that out. I thought it was really great. I really do.